Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the very fetching Heather Locklear.
And crackers and pretzels, I am getting phone calls for reservations.
For years, Heather Locklear looked like the definition of a perfect Hollywood life. She was one of the biggest stars on television, surrounded by fame, glamour, money, and nonstop success. But while the cameras captured the smiles, something much darker was happening behind the scenes. Heather was quietly battling anxiety, depression, and personal struggles that slowly pulled her into one of the most heartbreaking downward spirals Hollywood had seen in years. Soon, there would be shocking arrests, disturbing public incidents, hospital visits, emotional breakdowns, and moments where the people closest to her feared she could lose everything. Her career collapsed, her reputation unraveled, and her private pain became front-page news. But what happened to Heather Locklear after all the chaos is even more heartbreaking to watch today. The Queen of Primetime. Heather Locklear had everything that Hollywood promises. She was beautiful, famous, and rich beyond what most people can imagine. For nearly 2 decades, her face was on magazine covers, and her name was on everyone's lips. She played the kind of characters that audiences loved to hate and hated to love, and she made it all look easy. But behind the smile and the designer clothes, something was going very wrong. The woman who seemed to have it all was slowly falling apart, and the public had no idea how bad things had gotten until it was almost too late. Heather Locklear did not stumble into fame. She was chosen for it. In 1981, television titan Aaron Spelling cast her as Sammy Jo Carrington on Dynasty, a primetime soap opera that dominated the ratings and defined the look of the early 1980s. The show was full of big hair, bigger shoulder pads, and the kind of backstabbing drama that made viewers tune in week after week. Locklear played the scheming niece of the show's lead character, and she was so good at being bad that audiences could not get enough of her. She was young, beautiful, and clearly going places. What made Locklear's rise so unusual was that she did not stop at one hit show. From 1982 to 1986, she simultaneously starred as Officer Stacy Sheridan on the police drama T.J. Hooker, working double schedules to film both shows at the same time. She would finish a day of backstabbing on the Dynasty set, drive across town, and suit up as a cop for T.J. Hooker. The workload was brutal, but Locklear made it look effortless. She was everywhere, and being everywhere made her one of the most recognizable faces on television. By the early 1990s, her career had slowed down a bit, but it was far from over. In 1993, she stepped into the role of Amanda Woodward on Fox's Melrose Place, a character originally meant for a short-term guest arc. The producers did not expect her to stay long, and they certainly did not expect her to save the show. But Locklear's performance was so electric that the writers kept giving her more to do. The short-term arc turned into a multi-season run, and Melrose Place went from a struggling show to a cultural phenomenon. Locklear earned 4 consecutive Golden Globe nominations for her work on the series, a run of recognition that few television actresses have ever matched. But she was not done yet. In 1999, she joined the cast of the political sitcom Spin City, working alongside Michael J. Fox and later Charlie Sheen. The show was a hit, and Locklear fit in perfectly with the ensemble cast. She earned 2 additional Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress for her work on Spin City, bringing her total to 6 nominations across 3 different shows. She also hosted Saturday Night Live in 1994, a milestone that only a handful of television stars ever achieve, and she won 3 Soap Opera Digest Awards over the course of her career. From the outside, Heather Locklear had the kind of career that young actresses dream about. She had worked with the biggest names in the business, starred in the most popular shows of her era, and received the kind of critical recognition that most performers never see. However, Locklear was also falling apart. The cracks in the facade began to show in the mid-2000s. Friends noticed that Locklear seemed more anxious than usual, more withdrawn, and less like the confident woman they had known for years. She had trouble sleeping. She worried constantly about things that had never bothered her before. The pressure of maintaining her image while battling her own mind was exhausting, and eventually, she could not keep up the act any longer. In June of 2008, Locklear formally checked into the Sierra Tucson Medical Facility in Arizona for an intensive multi-week stay. The facility was known for treating people with severe anxiety and clinical depression, which is exactly what Locklear was struggling with. Her publicist explained to the press that Locklear had checked in for a thorough evaluation of the medications she was taking to help manage her emotional struggles. Following her discharge from the Arizona facility, Locklear transitioned directly into a structured outpatient care plan in Los Angeles. She worked with specialized therapeutic and psychiatric professionals to manage her condition. For a while, it seemed like she was on the right track. She had asked for help, and she had received it. But the road to recovery is rarely straight, and Locklear's path was about to get much darker. Locklear's tragic battle with addiction. In September of 2008, just 3 months after she left the treatment facility in Arizona, Locklear was detained by the California Highway Patrol in Santa Barbara County. A bystander had called the police after seeing a woman driving erratically outside a parking lot, swerving and stopping suddenly for no apparent reason. When the officers arrived and pulled Locklear over, they knew immediately that something was wrong. She was confused. Her movements were slow and uncoordinated, and she had trouble answering basic questions. The arresting officer's formal report noted something unusual. Locklear's blood alcohol level registered at 0. She had not been drinking, at least not enough to show up on the test. But her coordination was severely impaired, and the officer suspected that the cause was not alcohol, but the prescribed psychiatric medications that Locklear had been taking to manage her anxiety and depression. The medications that were supposed to help her were now working against her, clouding her mind and making her unsafe behind the wheel. The legal system moved slowly, as it often does. Locklear was formally charged with driving under the influence of illicit substances, a charge that carried serious penalties. But in January of 2009, she reached a deal with prosecutors. She pleaded no contest to a lesser charge of reckless driving, which meant she did not admit guilt, but accepted the punishment. The judge sentenced her to 3 years of informal probation, ordered her to pay a $700 fine, and required her to complete traffic school through the Department of Motor Vehicles. On paper, the consequences were minor. In reality, the arrest was a warning sign that Locklear's problems were not going away. Less than a year later, in April of 2010, the Ventura County Sheriff's Department launched an investigation after a strange incident near Locklear's gated neighborhood. Someone had driven a car into a public street sign, destroying it completely. The crash was not reported at the time, but investigators later found damage to a black BMW that was registered in Locklear's name. The evidence pointed in her direction, but prosecutors ultimately declined to file hit-and-run charges. The problem was a lack of visual evidence. No one had actually seen Locklear behind the wheel when the sign was hit, and without that proof, the case could not go forward. Locklear had avoided another legal consequence, but the pattern was becoming clear. She was struggling, and her struggles were starting to spill out into the world where everyone could see them. The wake-up call, if there was going to be one, came in January of 2012. Locklear's sister called emergency services from the actress's Thousand Oaks estate, her voice shaky and urgent. She reported that Heather was in severe distress after ingesting a hazardous combination of alcohol and a controlled substance. The dispatcher heard the fear in her voice and sent paramedics immediately. When they arrived, they found Locklear in bad shape, confused, and barely able to stand. They rushed her to Los Robles Hospital and Medical Center in Thousand Oaks, California, where she was admitted directly to the emergency room. Doctors and nurses worked through the night to stabilize her. They monitored her vitals, flushed her system, and kept her awake when she wanted to sleep. The combination of alcohol and controlled substances can stop a person's breathing or cause their heart to fail. And Locklear had come dangerously close to crossing that line. By morning, she was stable. By afternoon, she was well enough to be discharged into her family's care. She walked out of the hospital with her sister at her side, and the press, which had somehow missed the story, never even knew she had been there. The 2012 overdose was a turning point, or it should have been. Locklear had now been arrested, investigated, and hospitalized. She had come within hours of dying, or so the doctors told her family. The people who loved her hoped that this would be the moment when she finally got serious about getting better. But addiction does not respond to hope, and Locklear's illness was not finished with her. For the next several years, she managed to stay out of the headlines. She attended her appointments. She took her medications as prescribed, or at least that was what she told her doctors. She showed up for family gatherings and smiled for photographs. From the outside, it looked like she had turned a corner, but the people who lived with her knew the truth. She was still struggling, and the worst was still to come. The 2018 escalation and rehabilitation. The year 2018 was when everything fell apart completely. In February of that year, the Ventura County Sheriff's Department received an emergency call regarding a domestic disturbance at Locklear's home. The caller reported an altercation between Locklear and her partner, Chris Heiser, a man she had known since high school and had reconnected with years later. When the deputies arrived, they found a chaotic scene. Locklear was agitated, her words slurred, and her movements unsteady. She did not want them there, and she made that clear from the moment they walked through the door. During the arrest process, Locklear became highly combative. She was not going to go quietly, and the deputies learned that the hard way. She kicked them, scratched them, and struck 3 separate responding deputies who were trying to restrain her. These were not small gestures of resistance. She fought them with everything she had, and the deputies had to use force to get her into handcuffs. She was booked into the Ventura County Jail on 1 felony count of domestic battery and 3 misdemeanor counts of battery on a peace officer. The woman who had once been the queen of primetime television was now wearing an orange jumpsuit and staring at the inside of a jail cell. The legal system gave her a chance to get help, but Locklear was not ready to take it. Just a few months later, in June of 2018, everything got worse. Emergency responders answered a call from a family member who reported that Locklear was behaving erratically and searching for a weapon to cause herself harm. The caller was terrified, and the dispatcher sent help immediately. When the responders arrived, they determined that Locklear met the criteria for a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric hold, a legal intervention known in California as a 5150 hold. She was taken to a medical facility against her will because the people who loved her believed that she could die if they did not intervene. She was released after the hold expired, but she did not stay stable for long. Less than 10 days after her release from medical observation, police were called to her home again. This time, the report was about extreme intoxication. Locklear had been drinking and taking controlled substances, and she was in no condition to be left alone. When the deputies arrived, she reportedly became confrontational and kicked one of them in the leg. When an emergency medical technician attempted to secure her to a gurney for transport to the hospital, Locklear reportedly struck the EMT in the face. She was arrested again, but she posted $20,000 in bail and was released. Surprisingly, just hours later, she was back in the hospital, this time because of a reported medical overdose. The cycle was spinning faster and faster, and Locklear could not get off the ride. By August of 2019, the legal system had run out of patience. Locklear pleaded no contest to 8 misdemeanor counts stemming from the 2018 altercations. The charges included 6 counts of battery on police officers and emergency personnel, along with 2 counts of resisting or obstructing officers. The judge looked at her record, looked at her behavior, and decided that jail time was appropriate. Locklear was sentenced to 120 days in county jail. But the judge also did something unusual. He stayed the execution of the jail time, which meant that Locklear would not have to serve her sentence behind bars if she met a strict legal condition. The condition was that she enter a residential mental health and substance abuse facility. She had to check herself into treatment, and she had to stay there long enough to get better. The judge also placed her on 3 years of strict, unsupervised probation. The terms of that probation forbade her from possessing any weapons, consuming alcoholic beverages, or taking any non-prescribed controlled substances. If she violated any of those terms, the jail sentence would be reinstated, and she would go to prison. On August 19, 2019, Locklear checked into a specialized treatment facility. The court had mandated a 30-day residential rehabilitation requirement, and Locklear was determined to fulfill it. She stayed for the full 30 days, completing the program that the judge had ordered. For the first time in years, she was sober, stable, and under medical supervision. The staff at the facility worked with her on coping strategies, relapse prevention, and the underlying mental health issues that had driven her to use in the first place. When she walked out of that facility 30 days later, she was not cured. Addiction is not something that gets cured in a month, but she was different. She had a plan, she had support, and she had a legal system that was watching her every move, ready to throw her in jail if she slipped. For Heather Locklear, the long road to recovery was finally beginning. The question was whether she could stay on it. The long road to recovery. Before the addiction and the arrests and the hospitalizations, Locklear had a complicated romantic history that played out in the tabloids for decades. Her first high-profile marriage was to Mötley Crüe drummer Tommy Lee, a relationship that started in 1986 and lasted for 7 years. The marriage was a classic Hollywood pairing of television royalty and rock stardom, and the press could not get enough of them. But the public scrutiny was intense, the tabloid pressure was relentless, and the marriage ended in divorce in 1993. Locklear moved on quickly, as people in her world often do. In 1994, she married Bon Jovi guitarist Richie Sambora in a ceremony in Paris. This marriage lasted even longer than the first one, stretching over a decade. Locklear and Sambora had a daughter together named Ava, who was born in 1997. For a while, they seemed like the perfect family. But the same pressures that had destroyed her first marriage, the tabloids, the schedules, and the constant demands of fame, wore down her second marriage as well. Locklear filed for divorce in 2006, and the divorce was finalized in 2007. The timing was significant because her struggles with anxiety, depression, and substance abuse began escalating almost immediately after the marriage ended. There was also an engagement to her former Melrose Place co-star, Jack Wagner, in 2011. The two had known each other for years, and getting together seemed like a comfortable choice for both of them. But the engagement did not last. They mutually called it off a few months later, deciding that getting married would only put more stress on their families. Locklear walked away from that relationship the same way she had walked away from so many others. alone and searching for something that she could not quite name. Throughout all of this chaos, one relationship remained constant. Richie Sambora, despite their divorce, never abandoned Locklear. He committed to an active co-parenting dynamic with her to ensure that their daughter Ava had as much stability as possible. When Locklear was in the hospital, Sambora was there. When she was in rehab, he paid the bills. When she needed a dedicated private network of medical professionals, interventionists, and psychiatrists, Sambora financed the whole operation. He did not have to do any of this. The divorce had been final for years, but he was the father of her child, and he believed that Ava needed her mother to be alive more than she needed her parents to be married. The emotional toll on Ava was immense. Friends and family confirmed that Ava grew up witnessing the repeated, painful cycles of her mother's hospitalizations and rehab stints. Estimates place the number of entries at over 20, meaning that Locklear had been through treatment more times than anyone could accurately count. Each time, Ava would hope that this was the one that stuck. Each time she would watch her mother relapse and have to start over. That pain became a primary motivator for Locklear to maintain periods of sobriety. She could not get clean for herself. She had tried that and failed. But she could try to get clean for her daughter, and that purpose gave her something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. The long road to recovery is not a straight line. It is full of detours, setbacks, and days when getting out of bed feels like the hardest thing in the world. Locklear has had more than her share of those days, but she has also had days when she stayed sober, when she attended her appointments, when she took her prescribed medication as directed, and did not mix them with alcohol. Those days add up. They become weeks, then months, then years. And every day that she stays clean is a small victory against the illness that has tried to kill her so many times. But the question that everyone who cares about her still asks is the same one that has followed her for years. How is she doing right now, today, when the cameras are not rolling and the tabloids have moved on to other stories? How Heather Locklear is currently doing. In the years following her court-ordered rehabilitation, Locklear stayed mostly out of the public eye. She attended her appointments, took her prescribed medication as directed, and tried to rebuild a life that had been shattered by decades of addiction and mental illness. But the paparazzi, who had never stopped watching her, captured moments that worried her fans. In Malibu, California, photojournalists spotted Locklear walking carefully along the ledge of an office building, reading from a journal, and speaking aggressively to herself. Onlookers watched her sit on steps for over an hour, waiting for a ride, and the media openly wondered whether she had broken her multi-year streak of sobriety. The images were troubling, and for anyone who had followed her story, they brought back memories of the darkest days before the 2019 intervention. But Locklear did not relapse, at least not publicly, and she did not disappear. Instead, she made changes. The first and most significant change was her relationship with Chris Heiser, her high school sweetheart who had been by her side during some of her worst moments. The relationship had been turbulent for years, marked by the kind of ups and downs that made stability impossible. Locklear made the difficult decision to separate from Heiser completely, severing the engagement and finalizing the split to protect her long-term recovery journey. It was not an easy choice. Heiser had known her longer than almost anyone, and letting go of that history meant letting go of a part of herself. But sometimes recovery requires walking away from the people who were there during the bad times. Not because they are bad people, but because the association itself is triggering. What happened next surprised everyone. Locklear confirmed a new relationship with Lorenzo Lamas, a fellow actor and 1980s television icon best known for his role on Falcon Crest. The two had known each other professionally for years, but they had never been romantically linked. When Lamas publicly broke his silence about the relationship, he did not hold back. He called Locklear the most amazing woman that he thought he had ever met. Coming from a man who had been in the entertainment industry for decades, who had known hundreds of beautiful and talented women, that praise meant something. The couple made their first official public appearance together at the Chiller Theater Expo in Parsippany, New Jersey, a convention that draws fans of classic television and horror movies. They wore coordinating black outfits, stood close to each other for photographs, and looked genuinely happy in a way that Locklear had not looked in years. The images that came out of that event were not the sad paparazzi shots of her sitting alone on steps or walking along building ledges. They were pictures of a woman who had found someone who made her feel safe, and that safety was allowing her to re-enter the world on her own terms. The ultimate proof of Locklear's recovery came at a family event that could have been awkward or painful, but instead became a celebration of how far she had come. Her daughter, Ava Sambora, who was born in 1997 and had grown up watching her mother's repeated hospitalizations and rehab stints, got married. The wedding took place in Montecito, California, a beautiful outdoor ceremony that brought together people who had not always gotten along. Locklear stood united with her ex-husband, Richie Sambora, at that wedding. The two of them, who had divorced years earlier after a marriage that ended badly, put aside their past completely to walk their 28-year-old daughter down the aisle. Ava was marrying Tyler Farrar, a real estate investment associate, and both of her parents wanted to be there for her without the drama that had defined so much of her childhood. They succeeded. Locklear attended the ceremony looking elegant and happy, with Lorenzo Lamas by her side. Richie Sambora celebrated by singing "Livin' on a Prayer" at the reception, a moment that must have felt surreal to everyone who remembered the tabloid headlines from the divorce. The wedding was not just a happy family event. It was proof that Locklear had achieved something that had once seemed impossible. She had maintained her sobriety. She had rebuilt her relationship with her daughter. She had found a new partner who treated her well. She had made peace with her ex-husband. The woman who had been placed on psychiatric holds against her will was now standing in a garden, dressed in elegant clothes, watching her daughter marry the love of her life. Heather Locklear is not cured. Addiction is not a disease that gets cured, and mental illness does not go away because someone goes to treatment for 30 days. She still has bad days. She still struggles. She still has to make the choice every morning to do better, to avoid alcohol, and to stay away from the substances that nearly killed her. But she is doing it. Day by day, week by week, year by year, she is staying alive and staying sober. The woman who was once the queen of primetime television, who starred on Dynasty, T.J. Hooker, Melrose Place, and Spin City, who earned 6 Golden Globe nominations and won 3 Soap Opera Digest Awards, is now focused on something much simpler than fame. She is focused on staying well. She is focused on her daughter. And she is focused on the man who calls her the most amazing woman he has ever met. The tabloids will always be interested in Heather Locklear. They will always print the unflattering photos and speculate about whether she has relapsed. But the people who actually know her family, her friends, her daughter, and her partner, see something that the cameras do not always capture. They see a woman who survived. She lost her career, her reputation, and nearly her life. But she did not lose everything. She kept going when stopping would have been easier. And that, more than any award or magazine cover, is the legacy that matters. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.